Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer Mays, and I'm one of the co-directors of the National Center for Child Traumatic Stress at Duke and UCLA.
Yes, and I'm Lisa Maya Jackson, also a co-director at the National Center, and we are back for another episode of our co-director download series. In this periodic series, we interview leaders in the National Child Traumatic Stress Network and explore issues of importance to the NCTSN.
And today we are lucky to be joined by two members of the NCTSN Steering Committee, Alex Barker and Diane Lanni. Welcome, Alex and Diane. The NCTSN Steering Committee is part of our network governance structure, and it's made up of representatives from network centers, Category 2, Category 3, and affiliate centers, and now family and young adult partners. And the steering committee helps us to guide the network, to guide priorities, monitor progress, and sort of help support the growth and evolution of the network. And Diane and Alex are, as I said, our first family and young adult partners and representatives on the NCTSN Steering Committee, which is what we've asked you to come and speak with us about today.
Yes, and that's right. Let me tell you a little bit about Alex. So Alex Barker is a young professional who began their career as a youth peer support specialist at FMRS Health Systems, located in Southern West Virginia. Through the agency, Alex joined the NCTSN Youth Task Force and has used their lived experience as a tool to increase the quality of services provided to youth and young adults. Now based in North Carolina, Alex continues to share their knowledge and experiences inside the NCTSN and beyond. Alex serves on the board of directors for Safe Schools North Carolina, a nonprofit dedicated to resourcing teachers passionate about supporting LGBTQ youth in their classrooms. Additionally, Alex has partnered with NC State University on a research initiative addressing professional development needs of 4-H program staff as they pertain to serving youth identifying in the LGBTQ+ community. In 2019, Alex received the Youth Advocate of the Year Rockstar Award from Youth Movement National. Alex recently completed their MSW program and did their internship at the National Center for Child Traumatic Stress, and they will continue to work with us. Alex plans to use this degree in addressing needed systems changes that will impact service delivery for youth and young adults. Thank you, Alex, for being here with us.
And I'm going to do a little introduction for Diane. Diane Lanni is the lead trauma coach for the Safe and Sound program at UMASS Memorial Healthcare in Worcester, Mass. She works in the FACES clinic with Dr. Heather Forkey, where she provides peer support to foster care families and trains others in the trauma coach role. Recently, she's taken on the additional role as educational navigator, where she helps ensure foster children are receiving appropriate school services. She pulls from her decade of experience as a foster parent for the Department of Children and Families in Massachusetts. She was awarded Foster Parent of the Year and had roles as a hotline, respite, and unrestricted foster home caregiver. She has 3 biological children, 2 guardian children, and many transition-age youth for whom she is their continued support person. Diane is active within the NCTSN, where she's currently co-chair for the Resource Parent Curriculum Committee. Diane is most passionate about promoting the idea of foster parents as professionals and providing them with proper training and support.
Fantastic. We're so glad to have both of you here with us. And I'm going to tee up the first question. It's a 2-pronged question. So it is, tell us about how you got involved in the NCTSN and what was your path to joining the steering committee? And Diane, I'm going to ask you to lead us off.
Thank you, Lisa, and also thank you, Jen. I appreciate being asked to do this today. It's really wonderful to be able to express the culmination of everything that's happened for me to be on the steering committee. So if the listeners could just bear with my answer, it's going to be a bit long because I want to take you on my journey of how I got here today. And I want to say that it's probably not ever going to be the same for any person who makes it to the steering committee. And you'll hear Alex's story after mine, but I began fostering years and years and years ago. And as part of being a foster parent, you often have to take your kiddos to therapy. So I developed relationships with a therapist, and I want to give credit to the one who really just planted that tiniest of seeds. And that was a therapist, Genevieve Canehouse. And Genevieve and I had a very strong relationship, and she asked me to do her a favor to make her boss happy, which was bring in somebody with lived experience to learn this new curriculum that was a product of the NCTSN, and they're piloting it. So they asked me if I would join the Mass Child Trauma Training Project and be part of piloting some resources for foster parents. And to be honest, I want to say no. I don't have time for that. I'm a busy lady. I'm trying to raise all these foster kids. And I was very much in the heavy work of fostering a lot of dysregulated teens. But because I had such just a caring, loving relationship with that counselor, I couldn't disappoint her. So I said yes, and I'll do my best, even though I have an awful lot on my plate. And it was the best thing I ever did, because what I didn't realize was that I had never been properly trained as a foster parent to understand child trauma behaviors. I needed this education more than I even possibly realized. And I benefited from that relationship, not just in how I was able to care for my children, but in my own professional development. So I met Beth Bartow, who was the director of the organization at the time, Luck, and I want to give credit to all these people who helped me along the way, because it's not as if I got all of a sudden to meet Lisa and Jen on this call, and here you are, Diane, talk about being in foster care. There was a decade, this started in 2010, a decade of work to get to this point. And so some of the other steps along the way in my work with the Mass Child Trauma Project, I was able to go to the ANC and met lots of other network people. I was asked to be a co-chair of the RPC, the Resource Parent group for the NCTSN. I met my future boss there, Dr. Heather Forkey, and she actually wrote some grants that incorporated that lived experience piece, and that's the job I still do to this day. From all those network connections, I really have to give a huge shout out to Chris Foreman, who was my liaison at the network, who connected me continuously with people who were doing similar work, or maybe just needed to hear what I had to say. And then one day she just said to me, "What do you think about being a member of the steering committee?" And my heart stopped for a moment. But when she told me that Alex Barker was going to be joining, and I wasn't going to be alone in doing it, I felt braver. And so here we are, and I'll let Alex tell the story of how Alex got here today.
Thanks, Diane. So yeah, my story, I started off, so my hometown is in Southern West Virginia, and I started off kind of my experience as a youth peer support specialist at FMRS in Southern West Virginia, and using my lived experience as, a young person that had accessed the system, the behavioral health system, gone through that, and kind of, sharing that in a way that could help other youth kind of navigate the system and help them in their recovery. And it was actually through this position that I was in at FMRS that I got connected with the NCTSN. Our agency had funding, and that's how we got connected to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And so our director of children's services, Tracy King, she kind of tapped me on the shoulder one day, and she was like, "Hey, I hear that there's this really cool group in the NCTSN called the Youth Task Force, and it sounds like it would be totally something you might want to check out." And so Tracy and the liaison through the network connected me with the Youth Task Force. And that's how I really initially started, being involved in the network. And so I've probably been in the youth task force here for about the last 3 or 4 years. And at first I just kind of started off with just, getting a sense of community and foundation. I mean, going into the network as like a young adult partner or family partner and being new to the network, it's a big network and it's a lot to learn about what everyone does and cat twos and cat threes and everybody else. But I kind of found a sense of community and belonging in the youth task force. And that's where I started actually developing skills on like, how to strategically share my story, how to use my lived experience to influence different things and the systems and resources that are provided to youth and families. And so after taking a co-facilitator role just a couple years ago, again, Chris Foreman tapped me on the shoulder like she did you, Diane, and she's like, hey, we're really interested in having more family and young adult partners involved in the network, and we have this goal of starting that within the NCTSN Steering Committee. And that's kind of how it has come to be since then.
Well, I appreciate both of you shouting out to the different network centers and folks along the way and also to some of those opportunities that maybe were almost like a random chance or like this thing where you like, we're over here and then, oops, this road opened up and you went in this direction. And I think that for so many members of the networks, for so many leaders in the network, that is their story too. Whether you're a family and young adult partner or not, it's like this process of sort of figuring out where is your place and making connections, and no two people sort of have that same path to where they end up in the network. But maybe for our next question, we just wanted to ask you both a little bit more about the steering committee and about what that process was like for you to join the steering committee, which was just this past September 2020. Can you tell us about the orientation process or any lessons that you feel that maybe you learned or the steering committee learned from the process of bringing you both on board? I don't know if you want to start, Alex.
Yeah, I can start, and then maybe Diane can kind of fill in for me here a little bit. But when I first started the steering committee, the orientation process, I felt like it was just so well done. I felt like it was a collaboration between, you guys, Jen, Lisa, Chris Foreman was involved in the orientation process and really kind of helped Diane and I get comfortable with, what the mission of the steering committee was, what it would be like for us to kind of join the first couple calls. And I think in that orientation process, I remember Chris joining several of the steering committee calls when Diane and I first started to just add that extra layer of like connection and support. We would even have like, a half hour call afterwards with the liaison, with Chris, talking about, how was that first call for you? What was it like to kind of enter in this room, in this space for the first time? What are some questions that you have that maybe, being new, you might not feel comfortable bringing up right now? And through that, I actually kind of learned something in the process for myself, and something that I want to let other young adult partners really know is it's that when we do this work and we're contributing our lived experiences, it needs to be mutually beneficial. And for a long time, I didn't really think of it that way. I just thought, well, I need to be giving back to my community and things like that. I didn't realize, though, that it's been so beneficial for me as a young professional, as a young adult, to be connected with all of these folks in the steering committee and learn from them. Not only that, but to also kind of build my professional network as well. And so I just think that that was really important to add, because this whole orientation process opened up a lot of connections in that respect. And I think through that, one of the things that I also learned is that I don't think provider partners were going through the same orientation process that Diane and I were. And so when Diane and I went through that, we asked Chris, we're like, do they have like the same deal? And it really wasn't like that. And so I feel like the process in general for the steering committee now has kind of been influenced a little bit since Diane and I have come on, because now it's like, hey, folks are human. Whether you're a provider with letters behind your name, whether you're a family young adult partner, let's focus on the connection first. Let's focus on creating a safer space together. And then let's focus on the role and digging into the work. Diane, I don't know if you want to kind of add anything.
That, thank you for making that point, because that was exactly how I felt, Alex. That first, it was incredibly helpful to have somebody give us that warm handoff, so that I didn't feel like I was alone out there in the steering committee and I didn't have a safe person to maybe just send a little message in the chat to give some reassurance, like, hey, Chris, was that okay, the comment that I made? That sort of thing. I also wanted to mention that there were many, many steering committee members, I'm not sure that Lisa and Jen even know this, that welcomed me very kindly in the chat, and that were really grateful and happy that I was there. And they actually encouraged me to ask some of those process questions. I think that I won't mention names, but I asked some steering committee members, like, what do you think your role is? And they were very brave and said, I don't know. It took me a long time to figure out what I'm supposed to do on these calls. So you're right. It doesn't matter if you're a provider or if you're brought on with lived experience. It takes a while to learn what the expectations are. And so through that whole process of intentionally onboarding us and thinking through how would we do this in a thoughtful way, I'm hoping that it will change for everyone how the steering committee is onboarded, and also how they are kind of mentored throughout the thing. I had mentioned in one of the steering committee calls that I felt what we needed to do is make some intentional matches, so that we can, somebody with some experience, forget about lived experience, just experience being a steering committee member, can help to tell the new members, this is what I think that they're looking for, or this is what I think that you could offer. I also feel that one of the huge benefits to the people on the steering committee was, for me, I will ask the dumb questions. Maybe they're not dumb questions necessarily, but I don't have the burden that I feel a lot of other providers on the call have, that they don't want to appear that they don't know what they're doing, that they have a lot of stake in their reputation. And I'm not coming to this call with big fancy degrees or a Cat 2 grant that I'm stressing. I am coming there with a very honest, open mind, and to really trying to think about how does this process make sense and how can I make the network better. So I love my experience on the steering committee. I felt that it was thoughtful from the beginning, and I'm very pleased that I believe the process of onboarding us actually is overall improves the steering committee's onboarding process for the future.
Oh, for sure. And there are definitely no dumb questions, but what was so wonderful was being able to kind of operationalize and clarify points that maybe had hidden assumptions that people, weren't even aware they were acting upon, and not having clarity amongst themselves. So it was just wonderful that you both played some of that role. I'm going to kind of merge the next two questions into one, which is talking about, your added value and unique contributions on the steering committee, but also, blending that into what others have learned from you in other spaces as well. So to give you the ability to maybe talk about that within the steering committee, but then also in other network space. And maybe Alex, do you want to begin on that one? No, Diane, either one.
I'll tell you what, Diane, why don't you start us off and I'll finish you through.
Okay.
Good.
Well, my mom once told me I never stick with anything, but that turns out to be a great thing for the steering committee, because I have been on so many different calls, and I have connected with so many different people in the network on topics from everything from, refugees and to schools to bereavement groups. I have been involved in multiple areas of the network, and I know that there were many people like I had mentioned before, Chris Foreman, Jen Grady, lots of wonderful, Megan Clark, lots of wonderful liaisons that pulled me into work that they were doing. And I'm super grateful for that. But one of the things I found out was many of the other category grantees, they kind of tended to stay a bit in their silo. And since I was hopping around, making sure that in my mind that I was contributing that lived expertise voice wherever I possibly could, I was really making a tremendous amount of connections. And I have discovered oftentimes now when I'm on network calls, it would be rare for me not to know somebody on the call and not be able to connect. So I don't know what else Alex wants to add, but I absolutely love all of the people. It takes a very long time. I think that that's a lesson learned, hopefully, is that we can't just expect brand new grantees to say, oh, we have this lived experience person and we're ready to rock and roll. I think you have to spend a lot of time creating those connections, building that person up, making sure that they're comfortable, because at first I needed to stay kind of in my RPC group and feel safe there because the network was just too huge and overwhelming. But now I'm at a point where I feel like I'm almost a network expert on these calls and I'm connecting people. So go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, Diane, that's really cool that you mentioned that, because it's like very similar for me. I kind of stuck in the youth task force in our little group for quite a little while, and didn't really get to branch out that much. And then I felt like when I joined the steering committee, that's when I kind of started to see a little bit of the bigger picture of the network of itself. And so I started to kind of learn from the members on the steering committee, not only about like the different collaborative groups that are in the network, but about like the different centers that are involved and the different folks that are on the call doing this work. And so there was where I kind of started to sit there and reflect on my role as a steering committee member and as a young adult with lived experience, like, okay, so I'm in this spot where I'm still learning about kind of the network and like what all is available and out there and who everybody is, but I'm also this young adult on the steering committee. And now I have this influence, like kind of like Diane was talking about, to where I can start helping others in the network and connect people together and get, a lot of this great work that's moving forward to keep going. And I think too, like the contributions that I think that, just in general, family and young adult partners have to contribute to the steering committee and other ones in the world and things like that, is that whenever you have a group talking about whatever the work is, those perspectives are so needed, because without those perspectives, we're like missing this huge gap, that would be so helpful into what we're doing. And so my thought process is that, Diane and I are kind of sitting on this steering committee now, and people are seeing that, people are taking note that more family and young adult partners are coming into the network and in leadership roles. And so I kind of see my influence like as this person that's like, yes, these are all the spaces that we all need to come together. People with lived experiences, providers, professionals, whoever you are, come together as like a whole community and understand that we're all bringing in different pieces of knowledge, different perspectives, and different strengths. And when we combine those together, I feel like that's when a lot of the great work happens. I feel like that's when a lot of the intentionally informed resources that are helpful for children and families around the country, that's what happens. So yeah, with that, I think we covered it, Diane.
Well, thank you both. And you're being pretty modest about all of the contributions that you're both bringing to the network. I mean, we could
They really are.
an hour or many hours to talk about that. And we are so appreciative of all that you both bring. And I just love that idea that in a way you have this ability to see the big picture and move between different topics and initiatives in a way that sometimes others in the network don't. And then you end up really being, the experts in the network and answering questions for other people about the bigger picture and helping people see the big picture. So really, really appreciate that. And we also want to say that we really appreciate the sort of the courage on both of your parts to just jump into these roles in the steering committee, because really it has been probably a discussion for so many years. I can't even think how many years, maybe since the beginning of the network, about why don't we have family and young adult partners on the steering committee? What would it take to have folks on the steering committee? What role would they play? How's that going to work? And then the time was finally right to make that happen. And we have the two perfect people to venture in there and like blaze the trail for others that are gonna to join you and follow. So we do appreciate that. I think our last question was to ask if you have any advice to give to other family and young adult partners who are interested in getting more involved in the NCTSN. You've already shared a little bit about that, but if you have more to share about that or any other points that you want to make before we wrap up, we want to give you a little more time to do that.
Yeah, I'll start with that one, Jen. Yes, for family partners, youth and young adult partners, I find this group to be just a very safe place. And I just want to let everyone that's listening know that the goal is to help you to become a stronger, better, more productive, happy person. And it's obvious every part of the way throughout the network that my interactions have been with people who are genuinely trying to push the work forward, and they are bringing you along with them. So I find it to be a very safe place. And I just wanted to say that. But to the providers listening, I also wanted to say that I understand that it's not always easy to bring in somebody that doesn't have the degrees or doesn't have the experience, maybe isn't quite so polished. It's not so easy to know how to incorporate that role. Alex and I have talked on other calls about how it's gone wrong, times when we felt that our story was used for the benefit of others and we didn't know how to properly share our story. We didn't have the grooming necessarily and the training and the expertise to be smooth on a call. And we too didn't want to embarrass the provider, but we didn't necessarily have the skills and we didn't know what was even appropriate to share. What I suggest to the providers listening is that put in that front work, put it in, because it will pay off down the road. All the people I mentioned, I think that if you were to interview them, they would say it was worth it. I hope that they would say that it was worth it. It does take effort in the beginning. You have to put in a lot of work. I am very grateful that, the people that decided to have us join the steering committee put in the front work to figure out how are we going to incorporate lived experience? How are we going to make sure that they are comfortable? And we paved the way for other people so that now when new lived experience people are added to the network, they won't be alone. There'll be other people on the steering committee that have also done that job. It won't be the first, and it'll be easier. It'll be easier for everybody. So I think once you're a provider and you learn how to incorporate lived experience, it won't be as hard the second time. So please continue with that effort, because in the long run, it's really worth it.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point, Diane. I think the only thing I would add is just, especially for for anybody, for family and young adult partners kind of getting into the network and figuring it out. I think my only piece of advice would be to offer, hang on to the connections that kind of got you involved in the network, and kind of use those connections to get you connected with other folks that have like similar passions and similar, things that they want to get into as well. Because when I first started, again, it was our director of children's services at my local site that connected me to this network. Those local connections are absolutely key, I think, in making, someone's experience in the network starting off helpful and getting folks, feeling comfortable in that. And to also say that, I don't think I would be where I am today if I didn't actively just go to Chris or go to Diane or go to people that I know and be like, what are they talking about? And just asking the questions, even if I felt like maybe I should already know, I don't know, and so that's the advice that I have. And to also, reach out. I mean, I'm part of the Youth Task Force still. I'm a co-facilitator there. I'd love to talk to anybody that is interested in getting more involved in the NCTSN and ways to do that. I feel like there's a lot of people that I could point them to as well that would be great folks to make relationships with and just build community with.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, this is just such a joy and a pleasure to hear your voices. And I think Jen and I both want to just share, thank you and for all that you not just did here, but in your activities in the network. You have participated in reviews of our products, issues around webinars, the participation on the collaborative groups, and you have really been great at making some very important points and often challenging in really course correcting kinds of ways that we have appreciated the courage you did that with and the finesse that you did. You have just made it an incredible joy and a great learning experience for so many of us. So just want to just share that appreciation and give Jen a chance to say something and our farewell.
Well, I don't have much to add other than to also thank you both. We personally have learned so much from you, and we know so many folks in the network have, and we just love working with you and talking with you. And so we look forward to doing that for many, many more years to come on many, many projects and on the steering committee. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.